So thank you everybody for joining us today for our webinar, Making Carbon a KPI. As I've already said, we've got some fantastic panelists and some friendly questions and some challenging questions. But we're going to kick off. Nathan, do you want to give us a quick intro on you?
Sure. Thank you so much, Mark, for inviting me to this webinar. My name is Nathan Boniso. I'm the co-founder of Planet. Planet is a carbon accounting and decarbonization software. We work with businesses that are between medium size and large size, but also with small businesses with many industries. So I hope to bring a couple of examples, hopefully. Thank you for the good preparation, pushing us to really give practical examples. So I'm keeping that in mind this afternoon here, and I'm really looking forward as well to discuss with Prashanti, Emily, and you, Mark, and discover what you are also doing on your neck of the wood.
Excellent. Thank you, Nathan. Prashanti, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to folks. Thank you so much, Mark, for having me again on this session. I'm super impressed by the folks who are out here. So really looking forward to the conversation today. I'm the head of product for Net Zero Cloud at Salesforce. Net Zero Cloud is this end-to-end platform that really helps large as well as mid-sized enterprises, all the way from accounting, reporting, and eventually even to figure out how to tangibly reduce your emissions and bring in improvement on the financial ROI side of things. And for those of you folks who are probably following Salesforce, Agentforce has been a huge a splash that we've been making on the AI front, which is our agentic layer, and that's really going to turbocharge a lot of things that impact teams are experiencing right now. So super pumped to join you folks in this conversation.
Brilliant, thank you. And Emily from PawPrint, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm the MD at PawPrint. We work with businesses of all sizes, but generally on the larger side, to really work wherever that kind of intersection between sustainability generally, but particularly emissions, and employees or other stakeholders comes in. So we're really kind of working at the people side of things, so making sure that people really understand what they're doing and they're engaged around emissions and sustainability, and really trying to work out how we use that to build like a whole culture of sustainability in larger organizations, regardless of their kind of starting point. So yeah.
Amazing. And I'm just grinning ear to ear. I'm just so pleased that we've got you three here today, actually, because you represent those sort of different phases, right? So well, I think. So super excited about that. So Mark from Ditch Carbon, we help large ambitious enterprises decarbonize their scope 3 emissions. So yeah, we've got a bunch of questions to ask. Just sort of housekeeping rules, really. Not rules, but statements, I suppose. So these are being recorded. This is being recorded and will be made available. So if you're listening to this in the future, hello from the past. Please do feel free to go into the comments and ask questions as we're going. Don't wait. If you've got a view or you've got an example that you want to share or you want to challenge something that one of the panelists has said, do not hesitate to sort of put that comment in. We'll take you off mute and then we can hear what you've got to say, or indeed just read out your question as we're going. We've got probably about half a dozen or so topics that we're going to be able to get through. I'm going to go around each panelist and ask them their view. If we're really lucky, there'll be some debate around some of those points. So what I said in the prep notes was, agreement is nice. Disagreement is more entertaining and probably more interesting for the people that are coming along. So don't be afraid to sort of challenge those views. And really fascinated to see how Emily's point of view will contradict, because I think like Prashanti, Nathan, and ourselves, we're sort of very focused on sort of getting the data, helping people decarbonize. But I think Emily really brings the sort of the human impact, like really, how do you get people to genuinely sort of act on climate in their day-to-day job? So this is hopefully going to be a fantastic conversation. Brilliant. Okay, so I'm just going to get my questions up in front of me. So I guess the first question I wanted to ask, and let's go with Nathan, is the first one just in this time around. So what's like the best example that you've seen of an organization that implemented a KPI that's genuinely sort of driven action? And I'm aware that's probably one of the harder questions to answer because there aren't loads of examples yet, but
right.
Lead us off, Nathan, and then we'll go to Prashanti, and then we'll go to Emily, and then I may say something, and then we'll start with somebody else next time. But putting you on the spot straight away.
That sounds great. I'll take it. And indeed, it is I think a hard question to answer. But at the same time, it's not because they're not good examples. There are a lot of examples, but there's a lot of, I think, modesty among businesses nowadays that are thinking twice or three times before actually communicating on even great efforts and amazing results that they've had using sustainability. But I'll give you one that is public. That is a case study of one of our clients, So Rare. So Rare is a big French company that basically reinvented Panini cards. I don't know if you played with those when you were kids. You could collect these little players. They reinvented that digitally, and those are NFTs, so it consumes a lot of energy. And they were looking at their KPIs, the carbon KPI, and that pushed them to really rethink their technical stack and transfer the way that they craft NFTs into a different system, saving them 99% of carbon emissions. So that's a big win if there ever was one, because in one decarbonization action, which is not a small one, of course, right? It's at the core of their operations. But with one action, they managed to reduce that part of their carbon by 99%. Now, of course, they still have operational emissions and some work, right? But that gives you an idea of how impactful analyzing where your problems are and actually focusing in on those, when we call them hotspots at Plan A. There's many ways to call them, but that's how you should think, in my view, in terms of decarbonization. It is really, really hard to be completely holistic, hence the kind of greenwashing, but it is really possible to make very, very powerful moves in a quite short amount of time. So I hope that kicks us off properly, and I'd love to hear some other victories for the carbon or the decarbonization model.
I mean, 99% reduction, that is a strong first move. So let's see if we've got any other examples from Prasanthi or Emily that they can bring. Go for it.
Sure, happy to add on to what Nathan said. First of all, plus one to what Nathan said, which is there is definitely more modesty now. I think we've seen a reset, which is there used to be a lot of boastfulness before, and now there is quite a bit of modesty, and it's probably good to like balance things out. Now, I have many examples running in my mind, but the things that come top of my mind are one of the auto majors that we have as our customer. What they do is they started off their journey with actually reducing their emissions, actual intensity of emissions, and then eventually realized that financial ROI and business value is probably going to be a better way to like marry the message and to like, push the agenda forward. And what they did was they focused on their flagship vehicles and chose the highest, the more critical components that were the most intensive components, use that as a mechanism to first start looking at how their procurement systems are functioning. Is it optimal, or should they be looking at some things differently? And then one thing led to another, and eventually that had a very positive impact on their product cost. So here is a very, very real example of something that had an positive implication on the bottom line. And that's a very powerful story where you're no longer, someone in the sustainability team who's a cost center, but you're actually moving towards being a revenue center, which is a very, very powerful narrative. And I feel at the end of the day, that was, since Emily's coming from the people side of things, that's a huge storytelling and a narrative that runs across the organization, and it's easy to like align folks, which is often very hard in a large org.
Totally. Thank you for that insight. One stat that I heard recently, which I think is fascinating, just in the way that it was presented, it said that 60% approximately of US consumers wanted lower carbon solutions, but only 40% were willing to pay for it. And I just took that as 40% of people are willing to pay more for something that's lower carbon, actually, and that's an election-winning proportion. So it was quite telling, I think, just the lens through which we look things. But I didn't mean to jump on, but Emily, go for it. What
yeah, I think there's some really interesting kind of topics already coming out of this. I think we've certainly seen the impact of this kind of, first of all, the anti-greenwashing legislation coming in, and that in our neck of the woods. But I think there's a more broad kind of global thing, as you said, about like greenwashing and that side of things, which and it just not being as popular to talk about necessarily, or certainly not if you haven't got the evidence. So to sort of come to my example of a KPI, so one of the things we struggle with a bit is that we often are not able to kind of name clients and all that kind of thing, because they have obviously quite a lot of the people we work with are in quite regulated industries. And so they're really strict about the kinds of things you can say. But we work with a relatively big insurance company who kind of took a similar approach to what we kind of see as the foundation of a lot of this sustainability activity, which is if you get people to care about it first, the people who work for your organization and the people who work alongside it in different ways, partners, suppliers, all that kind of thing. If you can get them to care first and understand how it relates back to their role, so that kind of motivation, education side, lay that groundwork, you've then got a bit of a springboard to then have kind of ambitious KPIs around carbon reduction and all the rest of it. So this insurance company we're working with, they had a KPI which was about just getting people engaged in the first place and getting people to understand their own personal carbon footprint. Obviously that's not necessarily directly related to the kind of emissions of the business they work for, but just to really get them to understand that first as a kind of stepping stone to then understanding the organizational emissions and that kind of thing. And so they were basically aiming to get as many people as possible to find out about their own footprint. And at this point, they've got over 90% of many thousands of people have now found out about their own footprint and started relating that back to their own work activities. So we see that as kind of a really big success, because that's kind of set the groundwork for then what the next steps are that they want to achieve, kind of maybe more commercially or as a sustainable organization in general.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think that's often missed, isn't it? Just in terms of you've got to get them on side first. I was just Googling it, the trans-theoretical model for the stages of change, which are pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and then relapse. And if you go straight to, right, you need to optimize for carbon right now, which is honestly with my approach personally, I think that, actually you're missing a trick. And actually, I think what the sort of the pre-contemplation, the contemplation phases can be really well served by helping people understand what their own carbon footprint is before they do that. So there's sort of an education piece that needs to happen first before people can really sort of start acting on it. So a really fascinating point. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about probably greenwashing may come up once or twice further on. So I'm going to leave my points for later, I think. I suppose one of the things that has come up quite a lot, sort of the elephant in the room, I suppose, is the sort of some of the changing winds, shall we say, with regard to sustainability and how difficult it can be to sort of keep a sustainability program on track in these sort of conditions. I just wondered if there was any particular sort of anecdotes or techniques people are using to carry on the action despite the obvious headwinds, if that makes sense. So I guess to ask the direct question, how are clients responding to these changes? And is anyone taking a particularly creative approach to sort of stay on target, I suppose? Let's kick off with Prashanti this time. And feel free to not mention any American politics if you prefer not to.
Oh, please.
Absolutely fine.
Definitely not. Let's first start with addressing the elephant in the room, which is the changes, the volatility in the regulatory side of things. I mean, there was a lot going on with CSRD and then Omnibus and so on. And we are dealing with majority of our customers where their teams are of the size of 1 to 5 folks. And there are very, very few customers who have a team of say 50 or 60 folks, right? So when you're a team of 1 to 5, you're already burdened with numerous questions being asked, reports that you'll have to file, frameworks that keep changing, and so that's already a first level problem. And second is, I know Mark, you said we are all going to be speaking about data, at least the 3 of us are. So data is still a challenge, seeking data, right, quality of data, getting it from different parts of the organization. On many occasions, it's still like manual spreadsheets and so on. So that's a second challenge that people still go through. Now, the third one that further layers on is when you have this volatility that puts additional pressure on a lot of these people because they no longer have time. They're like stretched super thin. And one extremely astounding number that came across while I was at Greenbiz earlier this year was, on an average, people were spending 30% of their time on doing reporting before, but they spent almost 70% of their time doing reporting just last year or the year before last as well. So what that means is they didn't have time to actually work on taking tangible actions, which is to like reduce emissions. So that's pretty counterproductive on many levels. So which is where there is a real pressing need to like simplify their lives to make things easy. So that's number one. Number two is, I think this big pivot that we are seeing across many of our customers, which is how do we, business value was always paramount, but I think it's coming even more front and center now, which is how do I change the narrative around, let's take this particular action because this is how it's going to positively contribute towards the business value, and it's also going to improve the impact. And that I think helps on the narrative side, it helps on the financial side, alignment, and actually taking actions. I mean, let's be honest, all of us came to this domain because we really wanted to bring in and affect change and create an impact. And sure, accounting and reporting is super important from a baselining standpoint. I may also want to add another thing. We always speak about changes, but I feel we should also speak about what's not changing. So even though there's a lot happening, I have not seen any of our customers shutting down their impact teams or sustainability teams. I have not seen any of our customers' activities change dramatically. I mean, they are still doing what they're doing, which is rallying their troops, pushing for data, pushing for information, aligning things, getting actions done, and they're still presenting to their boards and so on. So just wanted to also put a pin on that, saying that sometimes things get lost when we speak about the changes, but there's a lot that is not changing as well, which is super encouraging given where we are.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. Emily, have you thoughts to add there?
Yeah, I do actually. So I think we're also seeing the same from our existing clients, that there's not necessarily big changes in what they're doing, what they're prepared to do. I think what we're seeing more actually is the people we're not yet working with, but we're talking to, are struggling more with how to make the case for getting something new in place. So we and they are having to become a lot more kind of fluent in creating a business case first and foremost, whereas I think when we were first doing this 4 or 5 years ago, it was more of like it's fine, it sounds like a good thing to do, let's just pick it up. And I think we're well beyond that now. So I think I sort of agree and disagree in the sense that yes, I think for people we're already working with, we're not seeing that changing much. I think what we are seeing, obviously, so all of those people being a lot more press, and we see obviously the reporting and regulation becoming a bigger part of it. But what we're working with clients to do, which is really to try and find a network who aren't necessarily a sustainability team across the business, who can then help pick up sustainable activity and help drive the messaging across the business and all of that kind of thing. So we're talking like volunteer teams, side of desk teams, whatever green team you can pull together that isn't necessarily new headcount, but find the people who are really motivated in your organization to think of their role as a sustainability adjacent role, even if it's not in their job description. Pull them together, give them the tools they need, get them set up to really help influence things within the organization. And if you can get this as like a cross-functional team, then you've got the best chance of really taking root. And so we're seeing that as a really successful way, even without adding extra resource, to make the most of what you've got and really uncover those kind of pockets of like motivation and drive across the organization wherever they might sit. So we're seeing that as something where we can really help leverage that. We've done it for a lot of clients, but I think the great thing about that is you're not going and saying, I need more budget for this, this and this, and trying to make a case for it, but you're just using what you've already got. You're using people who are desperate to help with something, and making sure that that aligns to what the business needs, as opposed to it just being kind of side of desk, slightly random, but good stuff that they're doing.
Yeah, as soon as it's somebody else's job, right, then you're not thinking about it. Or if you believe that it's exclusively somebody else's job, then you're not going to think about it, right? But if it's perceived as part of your everyday job, you're going to do something about it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Would that be sort of similar? We've got some clients that have sort of net zero champions within their particular sort of procurement category teams. Is that how that would manifest in your experience?
Yeah, so they're called all sorts of different things. I think one of the things we've realized is that everyone calls them something totally different. So
of course.
We work with eco champs, environment champs, net zero, whatever they're called, they're effectively these same kind of people who have a climate angle or a sustainability or an environment angle, but they're not part of a sustainability team, and really just building a framework to help them, do as much as they can from different positions.
Yeah, I love it. So they're almost like your secret agents within the organ. Well, not so secret, but they are sort of agents acting on behalf of public agents, so we say, acting on behalf of the sustainability team within the departments that frankly can have a huge impact. I'm sure we're going to talk about the impact of finance and procurement specifically later, but great point, Emily. Nathan, what would you add to that?
Well, look, there's already a lot that I agree with that has been said. I want to go back to we call it the ROI of decarbonisation. Essentially, there's the Venn diagram between revenue, bottom lines, and sustainability, and it's our job as the people that help businesses to reduce their carbon, and the people within the organization to make their case. It's part of our job to provide this case and make it very visible. That has been more visible recently. From the European side, it's been about the CSRD omnibus and this where is the threshold for this reporting and what exactly is this reporting. And I think that this conversation has brought back, kind of paradoxically, but I don't think it opposes itself, it brought it back to the essential. What is this regulation made for? It's made to essentially create an awareness list of risks, the set of risks that have to do with sustainability, the double materiality assessment that's been so scary for people. So the concept of this is not just a reporting to report. And Prashant, we have so many examples of the team that would just wish one thing is to do less reporting and more action. That's the single biggest kind of feedback we have. And the platform that we developed has been forced, over all of our events, but even more faster since these discussions, to make the ROI so visible. So the platform itself has transformed to make those our KPIs at Plan A, to gauge the effectiveness of our work, like are we actually bringing something to that table? Are we cutting the time to report? So really, how many days does it take for a team to go from zero data to I have a, and the time to action. So after this thing, I've made this plan, I've proposed it, it's signed off, and I can take my first action. If we're able to by a significant amount of time, which we track actively and we have, that automatically saves time to action, and that is where the ROI is unlocked. So this is kind of how we've experienced, as you're answering kind of one part of the question. I'm really well aware, but we unpack everything. And there's another piece to this is the expectations of our customers and their team, their managers, but also their externals, is that the software is now extremely efficient in terms of data analysis, data gap analysis, even what are the findings from the emissions that I've put into my pool. We need to automate all of this, and this is what we have done. So I think in a weird kind of way, these whole debate and these some of them legitimate questions that ESG sustainability has received has pushed professionals of ESG and sustainability to recenter their action and to recenter their message, their narrative, and take, in many ways, the project out of the garden shed and take up the conversation with the decision makers, be that the board or the financial, the CFO, so kind of gathering up and huddling up together has been, I think, quite beneficial for sustainability in the corporate environment. So this may be a little bit of a controversial point, I'm aware. I know there's been some challenges as well, but this has been the experience of Plan A and me as a co-founder, how to what sustainability means to the people that I work with and to the markets that I work with.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. By the way, you're a little bit choppy in terms of your connection, so I don't know whether you want to...
I might.
take the opportunity to switch to another connection or something, just to, because you're making some great points, but we're missing not every other word, but 1 in 3 words I'd say we're missing. But
that's really a shame. Let
yeah,
me
well,
see if I can
you
fix it.
had our attention anyway, which I think speaks to the quality of what you were saying. So all good. Yeah, absolutely. I think no problem at all. Yeah, so I think I've got some sort of thoughts on that. I think without realizing it, certain leaders in North America may actually be accelerating climate action in some parts of the world. And actually, if you talk to people about the changes in European legislation, I think if you're not in the industry, it'd be quite easy to perceive that as a real negative. But as Nathan says, I think it's a real positive. I think it's like focusing on action, because I find I talk to lots of people that are in sustainability positions that did a master's or a degree or something in sustainability, and what they really become is sort of an accountant, and that's not really what they wanted to be. They wanted to be the person that was really sort of driving decarbonisation. So let's get really focused on the topic of driving.
Can I just add a nuance to what you just said, if you're okay with it?
Go for it, yeah.
The regulation gets a lot of criticism on many occasions, but I also want to add that regulation actually helps people who've not even started this journey to like enter the journey. It's because we've seen so many of our customers start off with reporting as the first basis to like enter the journey, and then eventually they realize that, okay, let me baseline, take an account of where things are, bring in the right kind of credible information, and then baseline where we are, and then eventually from there use the further granularity of information, because some amount of the proof of the pudding is realized, and then go down that route. So that's number one. Yeah. Number two, I also want to like add is there is more awareness around risk reduction that can potentially come out of going down the sustainability route, which is, there's one aspect of, yes, compliance related risk, which is if you don't comply on the regulation side of things, but there's the other side of things, which is if I don't do certain actions, this is potentially a risk that I do have, either on my supply chain side of things, or either on my financial side of things, or a weather related risk, or a resiliency related risk. So just wanted to like add that nuance, that it's the volatility which probably causes the churn on the regulatory side, but not the regulation itself. Probably the nuance.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's sort of like maybe the regulation brings them to the table, and then they sort of start the action, I suppose. I mean, for me, I think the primary driver of climate action is market signaling. So we work with lots of quite large organizations that have very complex supply chains. I know that when they say to a supplier, well, how have you not measured your scope 3 yet? They go and measure their scope 3, because, for better or worse, revenue teams are a very loud voice in nearly every organization. So you're like, well, if we don't do this, they're not going to renew. Oh my God, we better go do this straight away. And I think, and then that cascades down their supply chain. So I really think it's those market signals. So using that as a premeditated segue into, what are the sort of the KPIs that we can set specifically, maybe within supply chain, to really drive the right sort of supplier action? Are there any sort of instances or examples? Maybe Emily, although it's probably not directly in your wheelhouse, it is your turn to go first. So I'm going to sort of go to you, but feel free just to sort of dip the shoulder if you want. That's fine.
Yeah, to be honest, we do get involved in this to some extent. So we are involved in emissions calculations within scope 3. So we will work where there's employee emissions, so 3.6 and 3.7. Yeah. So it is something that we definitely have awareness of, and also in any conversation that we have with our clients, increasingly their clients are coming up. And that's a really interesting thing for us, because again, this is relatively new over the past couple of years, that the conversations we have with clients end up talking about their clients and what are their clients asking them for. And where is the market driver, and to kind of adopt something like paw print a couple of years ago, or maybe 3 or 4, would have been much more around, I guess, softer kind of objectives and that kind of thing, and maybe more of a marketing thing. What we're seeing now is it's much more a commercial decision, and somebody's asked them what they're doing about sustainability. And I think particularly we saw it come in via kind of anyone who was working with the public sector. I think it hit first, where sustainability was increasingly becoming part of what they were asked for when they were tendering for new contracts, that kind of thing. But I think the shift is now across all kind of big contracts that sustainability is just one thing that procurement teams are asking about. And over time, that shift is becoming a greater and greater chunk of it. So I think for us, that's a really interesting step. And it's one where you think you can almost sort of see it spreading out in both directions, where people are asking what they're, anyone that they're going to buy from, what are they doing about it? Because the people that they're selling to are asking them. And I think we'll see that that's how it ends up spreading really well.
Yeah, totally. I couldn't agree more. And so for Nathan and Prasanthi, so tell me, like, specifically, like, what are you seeing that's working? So I think Emily's done a really good job of sort of setting the scene, as it were, in terms of that's the sort of the macro of the situation. So what's the micro? I've got some ideas, but like, and some examples that I can sort of share, but it'd be good to see if there's anyone from your clients where they've, how are they really sort of driving actions, I guess, through the procurement department, and what numbers are they using to measure their suppliers to really drive the change that they want to see?
Should I give it a shot?
Go. Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Are you hearing me a bit better, I hope?
A little bit. You're still sort of a bit fuzzy,
Okay.
but
that's
okay. It's like you're coming through
I might connect from my 4G in a second. I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
Just a short input on this. On the micro level, we work with businesses that have very, very large and complex supply chains. And they have very, very set certain things in their supply chains are very set. So they have to identify where they can change things and according to what logic they change things. And it does come back a little bit to speaking a language that a procurement team can understand. If you speak with procurement team, they have very strict, agendas and very strict cost and timings, and they can't break the chain of that. And so the sustainability piece has to be presented in a way that makes sense for them. We work with a fleet manager, so they rent and sell cars for businesses to use, and they are talking the language of tires and engine usage and time of usage of the car and how long it will take for the car to run or to be repaired. And that is the way that sustainability actually enters this supply chain, rather than a pure CO2 equivalent number that we assign.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nathan. Prasanthi, I'm sure you've got some thoughts here.
Yeah. Firstly, I think the Scope 3 is a huge problem for everyone, right? I mean, and that's where the largest part of the emissions come from. And often it's really hard to figure out, where do I start for many organizations? How do I start prioritizing? And that's where I think data plays a very crucial role, which is looking for the right kind of information so that you can identify who your upstream players are first, and then eventually kind of prioritize and choose the few folks with whom you can start, so that 80-20 rule, the 20 folks with whom you can bring in the 80% of the change. So I feel that's like the challenge one, if I may, and that's where a platform like Net Zero Cloud, and I know we collaborate extensively with you, Mark, on the decarbon side of things to help customers in that journey. And then the second part of it is plus one to what Nathan said, which is bringing the procurement teams along the journey, because often they don't speak this language. So how do they ensure that they are negotiating it with their suppliers, but also wearing a lens of sustainability, and to help these procurement teams understand that you actually end up getting a much higher negotiation, a much higher value for your negotiation when you add sustainability to the lens, because a more resilient supplier means you're going to have more continuity. You're going to have, probably the cost is going to reduce over a period of time. So that's the, the second nuance in terms of tangible metrics that, procurement teams can use over a period of time.
Yeah.
And then the third part of it is people start off with spend-based mechanism on Scope 3, but eventually where the real deal lies is getting the actual information from your suppliers, their activity information, where their emissions are, how they're using it. And that data is messy. It doesn't come in a pretty format. How do you bring that information, consolidate that information? And after you consolidate that information, how do you actually come back and help them in reducing it? And some tangible metrics that we have seen some of our customers, like tech majors, use is how, going back to basics, which is reducing emissions, their actual intensity of emissions, start off with that, and then eventually help them with the translation of those emissions reduction to their own, business value. And in my past life, I've also seen some customers where they help in the collateral side of things, where they, help some of their customers with, like, say an adoption of solar farm or, solar plant, where, if you're a smaller player, the financial side of things can be very hard. So there's also like tangible financial actions I've seen some of our customers, take. So I don't think there is one magical metric which seems to work across, but it's like it works for their ecosystem of players. And then plus one to what Emily said, it carries further, because once you start with one person, there is this chain reaction, which goes because someone's scope 3 is always someone else's scope 1 and scope 2. So yeah.
Excellent points, thank you. I would just pick up on what you were saying there, that I think the communication with the end supplier is really critical. I think being very clear, and to your point around stability earlier on, we've seen our clients that are very clear what they want, and give it a reasonable timeline to adapt, right? So, look, we need you to be SBTI today. No, we need all of our suppliers by 2027 to be SBTI compliant. Are you able to work towards that? Yes. Thank you so much. Please keep us informed. That's sort of, the sort of conversation we find works quite well. I think that giving very clear indications to procurement works quite well. We have a score that we use that we supply for our customers, but you don't have to use our score. There are some very simple ways that you can look at sort of benchmarking them against other suppliers without using ditch carbon, where you can just say, look, if they're more than a 5, they're probably okay. If they're under a 3, probably not okay. That sort of thing. One of my favorite ones in terms of like communicating to suppliers is really during the sourcing event. That's where I think there's a real miss. Of all the clients that we speak to, there's only very few that are doing this, I think, well enough, because large organizations that are the biggest sort of emitters at the moment, they're set actually some of the most ambitious targets to reduce. They're still sort of onboarding suppliers without sort of checking that they're climate aligned. These organizations, they take 2 or 3 years to sort of do a procurement cycle in some cases. So if you do the maths on that, you've only got 1 or 2 sorts of goes before it's 2030. So I think during the sourcing event is the time where you have the most attention from your supplier. They will do anything to get your business at that stage, probably, right? And so be really clear with them, communicate what your expectations are. And then I think you're just sort of, it becomes almost self-healing, because if every supplier you onboard between now and 2030 is aligned to your goals, then they're going to be reducing and trying to reduce as much as you are, and therefore they're on the same journey as you. Whereas if you're still onboarding, I don't know, ExxonMobil or something, you've probably got a bit of a challenge in sort of hitting your 2030 goals. So that's sort of some of the things that we start talking about. We've actually got a whole guide on this. I've just remembered, maybe Peter can chuck it in the chat, how to sort of enable procurement. There's a bunch more of that sort of advice and more that you might find useful. So sort of, I guess there's another question, and I think, again, let's just try and be as sort of specific as possible, I suppose. So your CEO or whoever has agreed that you're going to set, for argument's sake, an SBTI goal. You're going to be completely net zero by 2040, significant reduction by 2030. And you've made that argument and you've won that argument. So how do you now start really enabling your departments to decarbonize? And maybe, Nathan, you kick us off, and then maybe we can talk about different departments as we go around to try and give a more rounded view, if that makes sense. So how do we really start translating those? We've set this goal to everyday action, I guess, using KPIs.
For sure. So we think about it in almost periods of the year. The first quarter of the year is very often dedicated to reporting to your stakeholders, to our investors or externally. And then we create some of our materials, educational, upskilling, and marketing to match this seasonality. So after the reporting is a very ripe time to really get things going. And there's multiple strategy. Emily mentioned having points of relays, public or secret agents within an organization, and I think it's much it's almost like creating a flywheel effect between businesses when we talk about supply chain, between internally within the company when we talk about different teams. People want to participate to the success, and they are also, it's a genuinely positive topic, so people definitely want to get involved in there. So there's a lot to be done to actually create a space for action. This is kind of how we think about it. Regulations is also a motivator, but it's not necessarily the most powerful one. The most powerful one will be will be having I just saw a question and pop up, will be like, how do you kind of create a cross-pollination in Plan A? I'll give you a practical example. Our IT department is very driven by the green IT question and the decarbonization of their own of our own emissions on that space, and so they have really pioneered alongside friend and partner organization, how do you decarbonize our own product, and how do we show that in the use of sold product, because it's scope 3 category 9, if I'm not mistaken. So there's some people that will lead the charge, and there are some people that will be very, very good at also pushing the first leaders that have happened. So you really need to kind of create a pyramid of action in the temporality of a given year. We really try to encourage people to take action, that is doable within a year. Of course, you have a long-term plan, but you need to show results fast for people to actually follow through. So I hope that answers, again, part of the question. There's so much to say, but I hope it was good for that.
Yeah, nice. Let's mix it up and go to Emily next then for a change.
That's great. I think whenever you're talking about kind of a top-level goal and then trying to work out, how it actually comes into place, I think one of the things we see time and time again with carbon goals is that they'll be set for like 2030, 2035, 2050, some point in the future, and people forget that you have to kind of make progress year on year.
It would be nice though, wouldn't it, if we could leave it all at the end? Wouldn't that be lovely, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so I think there's always like a 3-step process. I think the first thing is you really need a very good baseline to understand where in your organization those carbon emissions are coming from in the first place. So really kind of empowering through the data that you can access and make sure that's as accurate as you can be in the first instance. I think there's like a leadership job after that, which is, as a leadership team, to break down which parts of that you're all accountable for in your individual teams. So you need to know, and it'll be very different from one organization to the next. I think there's not a one size fits all on this. For some organizations, obviously the different scopes have very different mixes. And then once you've done that, for each then leader in their individual team to really think about the timeline to reduction for their particular space. So just to sort of take an example, we've worked with a lot of organizations where the business travel is like a very important chunk of their emissions. And then really thinking about that's often sits with like revenue teams, sales teams, that kind of thing. And to really think, if we're going to get to a point in 2030 where you've halved this or whatever it might be, how much do you need to do each year to reduce that? I mean, first things first, let's stop increasing it. But after that, like really work out. So, you can't just kind of sit around till 2029 and then go, oh, hang on, it's next year now. So really very manageable kind of baby steps within that, and then work out who do you need to get on board within those teams. Like, revenue teams in particular, I think there's often an argument where business travel is a great example, because people often see it as being counteracting their kind of main revenue goals. Is like it's getting in their way. If they have to reduce emissions, that's going to get in their way. And I think that's where things like carbon pricing and that internally can have a real part to play. But also, again, as I'm always sort of thinking, is like, how do you encourage people that it's in their interest to get on board with this and really help provide a kind of win-win situation? So I think there's like a bit of a trickle down. If it starts at the top, you need to then really decide who's accountable, which teams are accountable for which chunks of that, and then make sure it's like really timely as to how they're going to work on it.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think there's that classic thing, which is everything above zero compounds, right? So if you're trying to get to a really big goal in 2035, don't try and eat all in one go. Just say we're going to reduce it by, you can do the maths, obviously, maybe using Salesforce Net Zero or maybe using Plan A to work out what your decarbonisation pathway actually needs to be, and just sort of start with something small, and I think that's the sort of thing, just get going, get started. I'm just going to, sure, I'm keeping Prasanthi just sort of waiting in the wings a little bit, but Miriam's asked a good question about sort of the value of creating cross-functional green teams. What are the best examples of how these have actually moved the needle versus being a feel-good initiative? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Emily.
Yeah, so actually that's a really coming back to sort of sales teams and that again is we've really in some places worked with green teams where they can kind of co-create the action that's taking place, and also the for kind of an educational point of view, the sort of content that they're seeing and that their teams are seeing. So working with one sort of client where they have their main customers are all big banks, and really thinking about how can we help educate their sales team, get those people involved so that they can then talk the right language to their prospective clients and that kind of thing. And one of the things we've got in our kind of longer term plan is whether there's a possibility for them to help co-create some educational content for their clients. So coming back to this idea that it kind of translates along the supply chain in both directions again. But in the future, that is possibly something we'll look at doing, is using these green teams to then educate other stakeholders and really have proper buy-in as to what happens and how it happens within their organizations. So yeah, we've worked with a lot of green teams in different stages, and I think we've certainly seen that to be a really sort of successful way of doing things, especially when resources are limited and being squeezed. So
yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Prasanthi, what would you add to that, sort of how we can really improve the value of a cross-functional team, so it's not, I know we're shifting a little bit, but so it's not just a feel-good initiative?
No, I think you mentioned that it's CEO-led first. So that itself is, I think, a big part of the head start there, because on many occasions it's not CEO-led in many organizations. So I think that's number one. And number two, plus one to what Emily just said, which is, keep it bite-sized. So even though, you're looking at a 2030 or a 2040 kind of a thing. But the second part of it is the strategic translation of that goal to what it means for you, depending on which department you are a part of. So yes, for the impact teams, it probably means emissions reduction, and then what do you do that particular year? But if you are in the product development team, like someone like me, what does it mean from a design standpoint? How do I design my product differently? Can it be more green? Can it be more sustainable? What does that look like, from a target standpoint? Same, if you are, say, a real estate team who's probably managing like buildings or even data centers even, what does that look like? Is your building footprint optimal, or should you be thinking about, reducing your building footprint or number of buildings you're leasing, or is your data center emissions, how many of them are green data centers versus like brown data centers? So, and then another example that I can think of is, supply chain is a huge thing for many folks, which is how optimal is your supply chain? Is your procurement upstream supply chain optimized? We spoke about that already. And then it's manufacturing process, how much of it is automated versus how much of it is, working on more green energy versus, downstream supply chain on the logistics side of things. So I think that strategic translation takes some bit of time and effort, but the moment that is done, those are like tangible, real KPIs that each of these teams have. Then you're no longer fighting about, who does what. There's like clear ownership set, and then there's like automatic collaboration that happens. Now, for all these things to like come together, again, you need tons of data, qualitative data, granularity of that information, which needs to be digested. And you need a platform that runs across the organization. And that's where something like a Net Zero Cloud, along with the larger Salesforce ecosystem, where you bring that all in and you're able to like see what it means for the different teams. Through if it's a sales cloud, what it means for your sales teams. If it's a marketing cloud, what it means for your marketing teams in terms of, sending quick marketing campaigns. Or if it's like some of our fellow industry clouds, what does it mean? And this is where something like Net Zero Cloud can help in like bringing all this information, optimize, compare and contrast, figure out what's the right situation, right action that you can take, and then eventually, push that down to like realize that again, I keep harping on the business value piece because sadly capitalism rules.
Thank you. I think that there's some really good examples there about like making a standard KPI a sort of a green KPI, if we will, for want of a better term, right? So if you're looking at data centers, instead of just judging somebody based on how many data centers are you running, what is the energy consumption, what is the cost per teraflop or something. I think is that a term? Maybe that's a term. I'm not sure. I've made it up if not. So so that's but it's very easy then to say, well, actually, what proportion of those are green energy? What proportion have been built using lower carbon concrete, that sort of thing. And so I think it's about just putting a thin layer of sustainability metrics across anything existing, and it's not that hard to do that. And so the other aspects I would sort of add to what Emily was saying earlier on in terms of the green champions bit particularly, I think people need to know two things. Like the first thing they need to know is that you're serious, that this actually matters to us as an organization, and that you're going to support them in doing that. So it's all well and good saying that we really care about this. Go on, Timmy, can you go please be the green champion for data centers? He feels good about himself, but then you don't give him any money or any time to actually do anything about it. And so I think in those instances it works very well. We work with a number of companies that have these sort of green champions, and they really are put on a pedestal. They are given the opportunity, they are given a voice in the organization to really speak about what they're doing in that department. And I think that's what everybody wants, is a bit of sort of recognition. So I think, make sure they know you're serious, give them the support they need, give them some recognition. I think that is how you sort of translate it from, oh, isn't that nice, to genuinely sort of having a business impact. So we've got about sort of 10 minutes left. I'm just going to sort of give people the opportunity to ask some more questions. Mariam, you're our favorite person. So Mariam, I think if we allow Nathan or Prasanthi to answer that question, or indeed myself, we're just going to say buy our platforms. We help you do it much faster. So I think in the interest of impartiality, we'll just say just leverage digital tools, because there are plenty available. I think if you're currently paying a consultant to do any sort of reporting, there is probably a tech solution that can do it faster and cheaper. I think we'll sort of leave it at that. Otherwise, we'll turn it into a sales pitch. Any other questions? But we do thank you genuinely for asking that question. Any other questions from sort of anyone else? Or indeed a non sort of platform, you must buy our platform question. One of the points I thought would be good to make, I wanted to pick up on it earlier on, around the sort of the green hushing aspect that Nathan and Prasanthi sort of mentioned before, is we're definitely seeing clients that are setting more aggressive goals but just aren't talking about it, because why would they try and catch the flack? They are serious. These are relatively senior people that I'm talking to in very large organizations. They are not sort of starry-eyed sustainability people. They are people that have got serious business pressures to deliver, and they're saying, yes, absolutely, Mark, we're setting a really aggressive Scope 3 goal. We're just not going to tell anyone. We know that in a number of years, there will be a change of government again, and climate change won't have gone anywhere. So let's just keep doing what we're doing, make sure that we're on track for our more ambitious goals. So in terms of the impact that we're seeing of these sort of regulatory changes, we're definitely seeing a lot more of that. Yes, we're carrying on. We're just not, we're just not shouting about it. I think, good. I think we've got time for one more question to go around, just to use up last few minutes. So yeah, I'm sure this question is asked in every webinar ever, but what's your sort of one piece of advice? I am a sustainability manager. I'm in a decent sized organization. We've set a net zero goal. I'm feeling budgetary pressure. I've got all my sort of secret agents out there, but I really want to start accelerating change within my organization through the use of KPIs. What's the one piece of advice you would give? I'll just talk for a bit, and then I'll tell Nathan that I'm going to go to him first, and then I'll give him a few more seconds for me to sort of do filling and maybe point to the books on my shelf. And Nathan, over to you.
Yes, of course. Well, I think you put that moment that my counsel will be a little bit different at different stages of the the sustainability journey, but in your character that you described, there is already a lot kind of there, which is getting people involved, which is getting a budget, which is getting ready, which is having some data and getting ready to do the decarbonization. And what I would say, and it's something that we have been, I think, mentioning at the red line, it's you have to tell people what's in it for them. You know, there is a group of people that will be highly motivated to make a change from a sustainability at heart perspective, going back to the previous question as well. But there's also a big inertia in a company of a relatively big size. A lot of people that will not get as involved, or that, you know, have a set of KPIs that is already sizable. They already have a tall order in their own departments. And so what I think is really important for that sustainability manager you described is for this person to actually go and engage with each of the, let's call them bottom line teams, right? Like the operational team, the sales team, the marketing team, all of these different actors of the company, and really tell them that it's not an add-on KPI, right? Like we're not just adding CO2 as like something that you need to check as well, but we're saying that acting sustainably is gonna, you know, add to your KPI. So you have to measure that a little bit, discuss what is material, what is important to them, in order to integrate that to your plan. Your sustainability plan cannot be a sustainability plan. It has to be, my business is going sustainable, and that's going to bring these different outcomes. And I think sometimes that we may be forgetting that when we build our decarbonization plan from a purely sustainability team perspective. So I think that would be my one a piece of advice for that person you described, Mark.
Yeah, I love that. A lovely soundbite there from you, Nathan, in terms of you haven't got a sustainability plan, we have a business plan that is sustainable. Fantastic. Right, I'm going to go to Prasanthi and Emily, but literally, can we do 30 seconds each because we're running out of time? So over to you, Prasanthi.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus one to everything that Nathan said, because everyone's on a journey, and you know, that journey part of it is very different. But the one two underlying things that's common across is you still need data for whatever activity that you're doing, which is reporting, scope 3, and so on. And you still have to deal with stakeholders. And for all those things, you need to have credible conversations, and that storytelling, you need data, good quality data, and bringing in that information to, number one, get seek buy-in, use that to like drive actions and so on and so forth. The last piece that I also want to say, which is going back to the 70% question that was asked, is use technology, you know, in wherever you can. Especially, there's a lot of manual work that is there across this journey. So a lot of, you know, technology with like AI or agentic AI can really simplify that, so that us as sustainability teams, we can focus on more of the strategic side of things, the higher order tasks, and some of the manual piece. I don't want to say it takes away from the human beings, but it simplifies, you know, their life, so they can focus on the real things that truly matter. So that would be my spiel.
Another fantastic soundbite. So to finish there, Emily, no pressure, 30 seconds.
We'll try and be really brief. I think one of the things that we often forget is that sustainability in its essence is about using resources as efficiently as possible. That's what it means. So it shouldn't be a hard sell to people in commercial organizations. Like, it just means let's get the most out of the resources we use. So if you can keep that framing as you're talking to all your other stakeholders, hopefully that should help.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you, Emily. Yeah, and I'll finish with a stat. We did some recent analysis on Exponential Roadmap Initiative members, so the people, the huge companies that are decarbonising most rapidly. And we found that something like 40% of the reductions that they were reporting were down to energy efficiency. You know, so if there's one thing, just to back up what Emily's saying there, you know, it doesn't need to be a separate thing. You can imbue every function with a sustainability edge, and more often than not, it will help you win more customers and maybe even save some money too. Peter, you got the final slide to pull up there. So really just time for me to say thank you so much to the panelists that we've had today. If you want to follow up, Prashanthi's got a fancy QR code, so you can sort of click there and sort of find out more about Salesforce Net Zero Cloud. Get in touch directly with Emily if you're trying to really build sustainability into the culture, I think is a fair way of describing it, of your organization. Nathan, if you're looking for sort of a complete carbon accounting solution, and obviously myself if you're after decarbonising scope 3 at scale. But yeah, it's been absolutely fantastic having you all three of you here and all of you on the call as well. Please do get in touch if you've got any follow-up questions, or you'd like to find out about how all of our customers are really sort of driving emissions reductions using us, I suppose. But look, thank you so much. We'll try and keep it to time. I hope you have a lovely rest of your week. If you'd like to join the next one, or if you've got any suggestions for topics that you'd like to see in the next of our series, please do let us know as well. Thank you. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much, everyone.
Cheers, Nathan, Emily, Prasanthi. Take care. Bye-bye.
Talk soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.